Hey everybody, this is Brandon Dawson at the B. Dawson Show. I have the pleasure to be sitting here with Casey Adams.
Thanks so much for having me on the show, Brandon.
How are you, Casey?
I'm doing great. It's a beautiful day out here in Scottsdale and couldn't complain.
It's unbelievable. Yeah, I had the privilege of being on your show here maybe 3 weeks ago or so.
Yep.
And it was really an exciting time, so I appreciate that.
It was phenomenal. I mean, first things first, just the podcast that we did, I learned so much from it, and having the opportunity for me to be on your show, I definitely appreciate it.
Yeah, great. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to do it.
Absolutely.
So I think what's important, I work with a lot of business owners, and they struggle finding and attracting talent that's self-motivated, right? Mm-hmm. And your story, as I got to meet you and everything, was quite compelling, and it reminded me a lot of myself when I was 18, packed up and moved, right?
Yeah.
So what I'd like to do maybe is just interview and get your mindset at different points of your life that drove you to be in a position where you had the courage to do what you're doing right now. I think it's really important for people to hear it.
Totally. No, absolutely. I mean, it's funny because like 3 years ago when I was 15, that was sort of the point of my life where everything changed. Because I mean, I don't come from an entrepreneurial family, and I have two brothers. Love them. Still work in a restaurant. They aren't open-minded to new opportunities. Like, they want more, but they aren't willing to get more, right? And I've learned from them, like, what I don't want. And it's just from finding mentors in this whole social media world of seeing someone and saying, hey, like, if they can do that, why can't I? It's just been a massive, like, mental transition for me the last few years, and I'm excited to talk about it on the show.
So when you woke up at 14, 15, I mean, what was the epiphany where you said, I don't want to bus tables, I don't want to work in a restaurant as a waiter, I don't want to go cut lawns or throw newspapers, I want to get involved with social media? Totally.
It's funny. So it's that, talking about bussing tables, that was literally like, quote unquote, my direction. Of both my brothers did that for 2-3 years, and I was like, they had a great relationship with their manager, and they're like, hey, if you ever want to come bust a table, like, feel free. And I was about to turn 16. I was 15 at the time, and I did not want to do that. Like, I've always enjoyed like little side hustles. Like when it snowed in our neighborhood, the entire street, I would shovel their driveway, but then I would bring 3 of my friends, get them to do it, and just like kind of build these teams. And just, I love that sort of stuff where it's like, I got to make my own hours. I got to control what's happening, but overall, like I wasn't dependent on like someone else, right? So, but the mental transition for me came from an injury through football, and I've always been an athlete my entire life. Played hockey for 10 years. That was my entire like focus growing up, is just how can I be a part of a team? How can I excel in this sport? And I've always loved the team aspect of just like, I've never been an individual sport athlete. It's always been hockey where you're working with a team. And then I played lacrosse, and then eventually loved football. And that was my passion for a good 4 years going into high school. And when I was 15, training for like 6 months, getting ready for the season. I was like the smallest guy on the team, but I was quick, and that was my thing. But it was like the first day of hitting practice, my helmet wasn't on right or whatever, and I ended up getting a massive neck injury where I was diagnosed with interspinous ligament damage, put into a neck brace for 25 weeks. And it was that day where I went to get x-rays after this just massive, like, head hit the ground, neck was massively in pain, that they're like, hey, you can never play football again. And it was that moment where I knew that I not only had to do something different, but I had to discover like what I wanted to do outside of sports, and necessarily because they pretty much told me, hey, like, this is something where if you do want to go play sports, you have the opportunity to potentially get paralyzed. And that was something that just very hit me deeply. And I remember during those 25 weeks, and it was throughout the summer, that all my friends are going out, they're having a good time. It's the summer, they're going to the pool, and I'm just literally at home on bed rest, and I have to sleep in my neck brace. I have to go the entire day in a neck brace, and it was just the most just depressing thing for me, because everything I love, just moving around, shooting basketball, just being active, I just couldn't do that anymore for a good half a year. And it was during that transition of 25 weeks that I couldn't move around that I started to think more. I started to understand, like, all right, if I can't do this, like, what is that gap of time where I would usually be going out? I wasn't the type of kid that just likes to stand still, you know? So I remember at the time I was doing nothing on social media business wise. And obviously at like 15, I was on Instagram and Facebook, but I never like saw it as an opportunity to build something from that or meet people or just completely change my life. Right. But one time I was just on YouTube watching just whatever videos I was watching, and I kept seeing this ad pop up. Ty Lopez, he was talking about health, wealth, love, and happiness, and he was just talking about social media marketing and just different philosophies that I've never heard before. And at the time, I wasn't someone that loved reading. I didn't pick up a book for the heck of it and said, hey, I'm gonna go read today for 30 minutes, right? Like that was not my mentality. And then I ended up buying one of his like $60 courses, and it was about how to have the good life. Like I said, health, wealth, love, and happiness, and ended up getting to this course. And all he said was, hey, give me 67 days. It's called the 67 steps, and watch a video a day and just take notes throughout this. And I kind of took that as opportunity, as just that filling that gap of time where I would be going out, might as well and watch these videos and take some notes. And it was something I was just curious about. But long story short, he was very much so my mentor, just unwillingly led me into the direction of this whole entrepreneurial business scene on social media. And that was definitely, like you said, the pivot point for me that I didn't know where it was going to lead to at the time. I had no intention of massively building a brand or doing social media stuff or whatever it is that I'm doing today. It was just that step in the right direction that, looking back, I can now recognize that. But at the time, I didn't see it as such a clear opportunity as I see it now.
So there's 3 specific things I heard you say. And I think for people that are listening to you, the first thing is, when you were very young, you learn the power of scale. Having 3 people help you shovel snow, you get the contracts, you make them do the work, and you get paid by the power of 3.
Yep.
So you learn the whole idea of scale. Second thing I heard you talk about was that sometimes it's the things you don't expect. Because had you not had that white space, you probably wouldn't have had the time, being busy playing football or sports, to actually be able to dedicate yourself to doing something that you didn't think you might be doing.
Totally.
So having that white space and creating it intentionally versus through an injury is something I heard you say that people should actively spend time on, because it helps them shape their thinking. And then the third thing is how you found your mentor. People get confused. I do a lot of talks on mentors, but what I heard you say is, you don't necessarily need to know your mentor, but you need to find a mentor.
Totally.
And then you need to learn from what they have to teach. And then you take that to the next level. Now think about that. Ty Lopez was someone that you've now manifested to where you're in a position where you get to spend time with him or around him, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Talk a little bit about that, because I think people don't understand how you manifest, intentionally manifest a thought into action and then into a result.
Totally. And it's funny because I have a great story with this, because like you said, Ty was one of those mentors that I just found online, right? And I never expected to meet him, or I never expected to he provided me with a huge opportunity that I'll get into. But it was one of those things where, just going through his program, he was always talking about books, like reading a book a day. And that's where he was recommending books by Grant Cardone and Gary Vee and all these different influential like business guys. And that's where I picked up a book, Crush It by Gary. And it was talking about building a personal brand. And then he was talking about Grant Cardone. And I kept seeing all these different people that were like influential online. And I just got immersed into this whole scene of like entrepreneurship and the thought processes that they have regarding sales, regarding just building a business. And I just completely like got this ball of momentum. But I would say the one thing that I manifested that completely like pivoted the direction of what I was doing was, at the time, I never traveled. I never flew on a plane until I could afford to buy a ticket myself. And it was one of those things where my buddy Caleb Maddox, who is an absolute legend, he was 14 at the time, and he was speaking on stage with Tony Robbins and Gary Vee. And I just ended up coming across him just from being in this whole like digital entrepreneur world. And he was with Ty and all these guys. And I'm like, how is this 14-year-old kid just associating himself with these people? And that's when I learned the value of networking and the value of actually like physically meeting people. And that's what I say still to this day, where it's like, you could have the biggest social media following, but if you can't turn off your phone and then text one of your good friends who is a mentor of yours or someone that you can genuinely connect with, there's no point there. So for me, from an early age, when I first got started in this whole space, it was like, how can I genuinely build relationships with people that I not only see online, but I know offline, because that's where the real value is. So I was like, all right, I want to figure out how I can network with these people. But long story short, it was the end of 2016 where Caleb's like, hey, I have an opportunity where there's like this young entrepreneur speaking event happening in San Diego, and I want you to come out and speak, because he saw what I was doing and I was just always hitting him up. And to me, that was like a foreign thing. That was like I've never been to California. I've never been on a plane before. And he's like, hey, come out to San Diego. And
how old were you?
I was 15 at the time.
15.
Yep. So I asked my parents, because I'm just super like hungry at this time. I'm like, dude, I got to be out there, right? And my parents have never been to California. So I asked my dad, I'm like, hey, can I go to San Diego? My buddy Caleb wants me to speak on stage. And at the time I was getting into like affiliate marketing, which is like selling other people's products through word of mouth or just promoting it or whatever. And my parents were like, why would you do that? Like, it makes no complete sense to them, like why I would, number one, go to California, nor did they think it was any like purpose to do that. And then I'm like, Dad, if I buy your plane ticket, because I was making some money at the time, just like selling these products and making like little $50, $100 commissions. I was like, if I buy your plane ticket, can we go? He was like, sure. So I ended up just booking the flight, and he didn't think I would actually do it. And it was like $1,300 or whatever. And I just make it happen. And then 2 weeks later, we go to San Diego. It was the first time ever like flying across the country, going to California, and we land and go to this event. And it was the first time I ever experienced like a networking event where there's speakers on stage and you're networking, and all these people that I saw online, I ended up meeting. So there was someone like Gerard Adams, who was a great mentor of mine. And it was just people that I started following online through Ty. But one of the most important things was I was going through Ty's social media program at the time, and there was 3 people there, Dan Fleshman, Jeremy Haynes, and Joshua Earp, and they were all teachers inside of Ty's program. So I didn't even know they were going to be there. So I ended up just hitting it off with them, introducing myself, talking with them, chatting with them. Long story short, amazing weekend. It was like January 13th to 15th. Go home. I'm like, wow, like this event completely like was just mind opening. I met Caleb. I met all these people that I met online, and it was like a successful event. But the follow-up thing was what really made a huge pivot in my life. And that was me at the time, didn't have a massive social media following. I just decided to send Ty Lopez a message on Instagram through the DMs. And I was like, hey, Ty, 9 months ago, I was in a neck brace. I was super depressed and I was almost paralyzed, and I got into one of your programs, and it completely pivoted my thinking into what I was doing on a daily basis. And then I was like, to finish the sentence off, I was like, I just spoke at an event in San Diego with Caleb Maddox, and I listed the 3 guys that were in his program. And I was like, I got the opportunity to meet Dan Fleshman and Jeremy Haynes, and your social media program has really just elevated my thinking. Thanks so much. And it was just an appreciation message of not trying to sell him something, not trying to like get his attention. I was just like saying thank you, not expecting that he'd get back to me, because I've sent him some messages in the past and he never saw them, right? He has millions of followers. And literally 10 minutes later, the day I get home from this event, he hits me back up on Instagram. He says, hey, interesting story. Tell me more. So I ended up just telling him where I'm from, like what I was working on at the time. And long story short, he says, you should come out to LA and shoot a video with me. Text me. So 10 minutes later, I text him. I was like, hey, this is Casey from Instagram. He sends me a text. He's like, when are you available to come out? I'll connect you with my team. And long story short, 2 weeks later, I'm flying out to LA. He flies out, me and my mom, because I was like, hey, I can't come out unless you fly my mom out. I'm 16. But 2 weeks later, going to LA, he puts me in a hotel, flies me out. We go to his house for a couple of days. And like that was my first time in Los Angeles. And it was one of those things that just really just allowed me to say, hey, like through this device, my phone, Instagram, whatever you want to call it, this opportunity came about. So that was like like you said, in the sense of manifesting, like my thought was, hey, how can I meet him one day? Not expecting that DM would lead to that. But I always talk about that story because that was the first time in my life where I saw an opportunity just so clearly as, hey, this led to that, therefore let me keep doing it. And I met a lot of cool people there, and that was like the first time that I experienced like actually physically meeting someone that massively influential that I followed online. And it was just sort of a mental transition that allowed me to say, hey, let me keep doing this, let me keep following this path, and really just keep surrounding myself with these people that are influential. So I dedicated the next 6 months of 2017 to going out to Los Angeles once a month and staying with a couple people that I just met on social media. And it was hard for my parents because I was like 16 at the time, and they were like, you're not going to travel across the country by yourself. And I ended up having to sell them on the fact of letting me like miss school. And it was a huge battle at the time because my parents just had no idea what I was doing. But like you said, that was like the first time that I actually like manifested something that really just allowed me to say, hey, this worked. Let me keep doing this.
So let's break this down, because I think this is really important, because you've said quite a bit in that.
Totally.
Right. And I think the first thing is, when you first made the decision to follow somebody and align with what they were teaching. And then you completely committed to it.
Yep.
I think people miss, that's the first part of manifestation, right? Is visualizing something. So you visualize whatever Ty was teaching you. And then that propelled you to be excited enough to go out to San Diego.
Totally.
To the extent you had to convince your family, right? Like that was a pivotal point for you, because if your parents would have just put pressure on you and shut it down, your whole life might have changed.
Absolutely.
So people that are listening to this, when you have that gut intuition and you've actually made a commitment, like you were following what he was teaching and you knew who you're looking for, you knew what you wanted to learn, so you put yourself in play. Just go to that moment and give people confidence that where there's a will, you got to make a way, because other people will take those opportunities away from you because they're thinking of things from their own point of reflection, right?
Yep.
How hard was it to convince your parents?
That was the hardest sale. I always say this, like, what was the hardest sale you've ever had to close? And it was my parents, right? And it was one of those things where, like, they were completely, like, unaware of what I was doing. They saw me just sitting in my room on my phone in my neck brace during these 25 weeks and saw me taking notes. And they never really thought about it at the time. They're just like, all right, he's doing his thing. I don't know what he's writing about or whatever, but I was writing down like success principles and daily routines and what I wanted to do.
At 15.
Yeah, 15. And this is all from Ty. So when I asked them to say, hey, can I go to San Diego to speak at this event? Like, it was one of those things, like, it didn't even, like, it just went in one ear and out the other. They were like, no, like, why would you do that, right? It was something that they've never experienced. I have two older brothers, and I'm this young kid that they're like, hey, you need to go get a job. Your brothers have been working at this restaurant. Like, go ahead and apply. And I remember my mom made me apply for, like, this pizza place and at the restaurant, but I purposefully, like, I was a good kid, right? But I didn't want the job, so I made sure that I showed up late or whatever it was. Like, I just did not want the job, right? So it was one of those things, though, throughout this process of, like, making a couple of dollars here and there on social media, where the time where I influenced them was the time where I literally just, like, booked the flights in my name, in my dad's name, and I was like, here's your ticket, we're going. And it was more so this impulse decision that I made, that showing my commitment made them commit to saying, okay, like, you can do this, right?
Grant talks about your attention follows your money.
Yeah.
In this, I talk about leadership. Anybody can lead, right? Leadership is influence.
Yep.
And what you did there is you led your parents by influencing them because of your commitment. And they saw that you were willing to spend the money, and therefore they were willing to give their attention to something, if it's that important to you, and support you in doing it.
Yeah.
And I think those little granular steps to freedom, right? Because you're learning, and what you've learned. I mean, what I'm seeing with you right now is at 15, you learned the process. By 16, you had manifested the things that you wanted to manifest in your life. By 17, you made the huge leap to traveling and coming here, and here you are, 18.
Yep.
And I just came off a business summit that I taught 250 business owners that are all extremely successful. Half of them didn't even know how to load Instagram onto their phones. Think about this.
Yeah.
What would a traditional business coupled with somebody who at 15, 16, 17, and 18 has learned to go out and build a very deep, dynamic brand that you're building here, what do you think that magic could do, those two things coming together?
No, it's huge. And one of the biggest things, like, looking back these last 3 years that I've always been focused on is, number one, building a personal brand, because something that, like, very much impacted me deeply was something that Gary Vee said when I read his book. It was like, in the modern day of business, your brand is what people remember, in the sense of people remember you in the sense of they remember your brand. So they always talk about, like, hey, you are your brand and your brand is you. So at the time when I was building my personal brand, like, that Build Your Empire wasn't acquired yet. Me, John, and Josh weren't business partners on this brand like we call Build Your Empire, which is my main focus nowadays. But I've always understood the importance of brand, because it helps people know, like, and trust you, and following all these people like Ty and Grant and Gary, it was one of those things where they had so much of my attention, where it was like, I always took a step back. I'm like, number one, why am I paying attention to them? Number two, what are they doing and saying and making me feel that allows me to go back to them? And I was trying to understand, like, the psychology of, like, what they were doing, because Ty always talked about, like, the 25 cognitive biases of, like, making people know, like, and trust you. But I would say, back to the question of, if someone's building a business today, like your digital footprint, I like to call it, is like how people remember you, especially someone my age, 18 to 25, these millennials, where if you say, hey, I own this business, and then we go on Instagram and it's not there, whether that be it's $100 million business, $1 billion company, if we go on Instagram, we type it in and don't find it, we're just like what? Like, what do you mean? Like, it's something where it's so necessary nowadays, especially in this millennial market, where if you're not there, in our mind, like, you're not even there at all, right? And you could be crushing it. And I feel like social media is one of those things where it comes down to a commitment of people who don't want to do it. They've committed to not doing it, even though they know it's right. It's one of those things that you have to not only sell yourself on, but understand the importance of it. And I think within the last 3 years, I've been able to see someone like Grant Cardone, where I started following him, and then I go to 10X Growth Con, and there's 35,000 people. That came from him building a brand that people know, like, and trust, but also remember. But he also has the substance. You know, I was reading this book by Peter Thiel, 0 to 1, and it was like, you can't build a product just off brand. You have to have the substance. And I think that's the same thing with a company brand or a personal brand on social media, where it's like you could have the best Instagram post, you could have the best name, the best logo, but if you're not providing genuine content, you're not really putting content out there for impactful purpose, like, no one's going to stick to it. You know, that's why someone like Grant is so successful, because he has substance. You know, he's not saying he's a real estate investor. He's showing you, he's actually teaching you, he's done it. He has the results that actually people respect. So back to the question though, I think it's one of those things where if you're trying to capture someone's attention, especially someone that's a millennial, you have to focus on your digital brand, because if you go to a brick and mortar store and they have a great display, great, like, that'll catch your attention while they're there. But what happens when they're not there, right? Like, Gary always talks about attention is a currency, where it's like you can only have so much with someone's attention because there's so many things to follow, so many videos to watch, so many personal brands to just see what they're up to, where it's like the only thing that makes you different is the content you put out and the consistency of how you put it out there, because there's so many things that are happening on a consistent basis that taking a step back and understanding the importance of it and the importance of attention on social media is where I know a lot of people don't have dialed in yet, but is very important.
There was just a annual Bain Capital Summit, and they had the CEOs of some of the largest companies in the world. And what those CEOs talked about was those businesses that are truly at scale, you know, your Amazons and your Walmarts and things are crushing it right now. Those micro market businesses that are at scale and in a micro market way, which is ever present, online journey, the whole customer journey or patient journey.
Totally.
Those that are really paying attention to what you just said. You can't just promote it and talk about it. You actually have to do it. And if you do it and you promote and talk about it and you get other people promoting and talking about it, there's this multiplication effect. And those businesses that are very intentional and purposeful about doing all that together are killing it. And the people who are getting devastated with all the online stuff and all that in all markets are the ones that aren't paying attention to appealing to the customer or the patient or whoever they're talking to, their audience or their community, in a way where they're easily found and understood. And then whatever the promise is, it's fulfilled. I just came off, like I said, the summit with all those business owners. And I think you're hitting on something that is a pivotal, I can't say it with my new Invisaligns, a pivotal issue for business owners. I just left my dentist office. I just got Invisalign, and I had to ask them what their I couldn't even find them. And this guy is a great guy. And, you know, they have the typical stuff. And their answer was, well, we have to go and find out our girl who's doing it for us, but there's no intentionality behind it. Right. And same with our customers, our members that were at our meeting and last week. And one of them set up a personal Instagram. So they had a business Instagram, you know, all the boring stuff.
Totally.
Set up her personal Instagram. I said, go after your personal brand. Talked about what she's doing to change patients' lives. Somebody saw it and immediately called and said, I want an appointment. That was a $6,000 transaction because you took a few minutes and you went out and you put yourself out there. What you're talking about, I think, is you know, I'm 50. I wasn't using social media. I had a closed audience. I never put a lot of thought into it until I was looking at what I'm going to do to conquer the rest of my life, right? But finding somebody like you and seeing what you've been able to do, I don't believe traditional business people understand the depth of what you just said, that if you have your brand, you have fulfillment of promise, you can back that up with proof and evidence, and you put yourself out there, it dramatically amplifies your overall success.
Absolutely.
And you learn this at
in the last 3 years, 15 to 18. It's been
some business owners go their whole life, they don't learn this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, it came from sitting down, like starting a podcast. I started one about a year and a half ago, and that was a huge thing for me in the sense of just learning from others. You know, I believe strongly in mentorship, and I've had the opportunity to sit down with over 100 like world-class entrepreneurs. And I think it's more so came from understanding what they're doing more than trying to come up with my own philosophies, right? People always say like stand on the shoulder of giants. And I consider that to be a tactic of mine, where I've been able to sit down with Grant Cardone or Andy Frisella or chat with Ty Lopez and Gary Vee about what I'm doing and hearing their insight, but also seeing it and actually meeting them and understanding like their operation. That's given me the clarity to understand like, all right, this isn't only something I should do, it's something I have to do, in the sense if I want to conquer and build a business and continue to grow my brand, it's something that you just don't hit the pedal a little bit, you go all in. And that's what I've been doing for like the last year and a half completely, is not only building my brand, but helping others build their brand. And that's how me and John Malott connected. And that's how Build Your Empire came about, was through a client of mine that I worked on and built their brand, came across this opportunity, Build Your Empire, and we acquired the brand. And that's been my major focus, because the biggest thing that I wanted for myself is, yes, a personal brand's very important, but I want something that isn't only about me, right? Like my personal brand will live on forever, in the sense of like you are always going to be you, but I wanted to have something that will back that, meaning Build Your Empire is something that there's no face to it, that it can always build and grow by itself. And that's why we really focused in on that, because it allows me to not only grow through the brand, but the brand grows through me, and it allows an audience to attract to a brand that is, yes, associated with me, John, and Josh, but it's bigger than all of us combined. And that's been my major focus. And I think that business owners need to look at it that way, that yes, you can be completely crushing your business and growing your business brand, but they want to know who's behind it, right? And I kind of did it the opposite. If I built my brand, then we acquired this brand, and I've been building that actual company, Build Your Empire, through my brand, right? So it's more so like,
you did it the other way.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are the other way. For example, like someone like yourself that's going very hard into your personal brand now, it's like it's easier for someone like that, because they have the experience, they have the knowledge, they have the wisdom, that it just, like when we did our podcast, it was just so natural and flowing, that for someone like me that doesn't have the experience and the knowledge and the success of selling companies, like we're more so building brands on the intent of our journey, right? You guys can now build brands on the intent of accomplishments and also just real practical knowledge. So for people that are business owners that have had the experience and wisdom, I think you're at an advantage, because the content that you create is so organic and natural, and it's applicable to you, that it's something that it's the documentation process that is what I think a lot of people need to understand, where it's, if you've had massive success, just document, number one, what you've done and talk about it, but then also document what you're currently doing, because that's what people want to see, is the track record, right? But I know we've just this question itself, I think people need to understand what side are you on? Are you building a brand, living through your journey to then build another company like myself? Or have you already built a company and that has massive exposure, but no one knows who you are in the outside world? So how do you grow your personal brand and get the recognition?
So here's the challenge to you. When I have my next big meeting, I'm going to have you come talk to all our people, and talk to them about that exact concept. And I think that is the missing link for a lot of business owners, and I'll help you build that. You help me be a better podcaster.
Absolutely.
And build my social media. And I would encourage everyone that's listening to this podcast to go follow Build Your Empire. Start following Casey Adams.
Thank you.
Listen to this. You're on it. You're nailing it. Your courage is admirable.
Thank you.
I wish I was 18 and your bunk buddy, so that we could be doing this together. And I had another 30 years ahead of me, but I'll crush it over the next 20.
Heck yeah.
Casey, thanks, buddy.
Thanks
really
so much,
appreciate
Brandon.
being on the show.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.